Okay, so let's dive into this really fascinating story. It asks a pretty fundamental question. What if you weren't the only one living inside your own body?
So this whole thing kicks off with our protagonist, a guy named Daniel Voss, and he's already in deep trouble. He just wakes up, in a car, in a hospital parking lot, and he has absolutely no memory of driving there. And believe me, that mystery, that's just the tip of the iceberg. And that really sets up the central question of Daniel's entire journey. It's like, what if your own mind was a house, but a house filled with rooms you've never ever seen? We're going to follow along as he tries to find the keys to those locked rooms inside his own head. All right, Section 1, a man in pieces. So when we first meet Daniel, he's basically adrift, you know? He's having these episodes, as he calls them, and these aren't just little memory lapses. We're talking major blackouts, where he loses huge chunks of time and, control over his own life. I mean, his life is just filled with these gaps, right? These moments where some other version of him is out there doing something, and he has zero access to it. It's kind of like pages from his own life story have just been ripped out, and he's left holding the empty book.
So a doctor in the ER gives it a name, dissociative, and he says it's treatable, something they understand, at least partially. And you got to pay attention to those last two words, because at least partially holds the entire mystery, right? They can name it, but they don't really know what's going on inside him.
Okay, Section 2, the body as text. So Daniel's real journey, the one that goes inward, it really kicks off when he meets someone who sees the body in a totally different way. Not just as, flesh and bone, but as a story that's always being written. Right, so he meets this woman, Sable. She is a tattooist, but her whole philosophy is pretty incredible. She believes that when the needle goes into the skin, the image isn't just sitting on the surface, it's entering the nervous system. The idea is that marking the outside can literally rewire the inside. And for Daniel, well, this idea is about to become a total game changer.
And this brings us to a really core metaphor for how we can understand the self in this story. The idea of the body as a palimpsest.
So, what's a palimpsest? Well, it's basically an old manuscript page that's been scraped clean so it can be written on again, but, and this is the key part, you can still see traces of the original text underneath. And that's exactly how Sable sees our bodies, a surface that holds the history of all its previous versions. Nothing is ever truly gone.
And then it happens. They have this chance meeting in a parking lot, and Sable spots these weird marks on Daniel's body. And to her, they're not just random scratches or bruises. No way. She recognizes them for what they are, a kind of communication, a message from a part of him that he doesn't even know exists. Okay, Section 3, mapping the inner world. So this discovery, it changes everything. Daniel stops being just a passive victim of what's happening to him and starts becoming an investigator of his own mind. And his new therapist, a Dr. Patel, she just completely reframes the whole situation for him. The goal isn't some cure that's going to erase these other parts of him. No, the goal, she says, is internal democracy. It's about communication. It's about making sure every part gets a voice. And this is where things get really wild. He finds this recurring mark, 4 little circles drawn on his kitchen table. And it's a signature that matches the marks on his own body. And this is so important because it means the parts of him that take over, they're not just random chaotic impulses, they're intentional. They're leaving clues. They want to be found. So he starts to learn that he has this whole internal population. You've got Null, who's like this ancient pre-verbal protector, the one who's been driving the car, keeping his hands at 10 and 2 during the blackouts. And then you've got June. June's the correspondent, the one leaving the marks, the one who is so desperately trying to make contact. All right, Section 4, a new correspondence. You can see how this discovery just transforms everything for him. He's no longer a victim. He's becoming an active participant, a correspondent with his own mind, and now he's ready to write back. So he takes Sable's advice, and he does something that sounds really simple, but it's actually pretty radical. Instead of fighting these episodes or trying to suppress them, he just leaves a note on his kitchen table. I know you're there. I'm trying to listen. In the reply he gets back, wow, it's in handwriting that's almost his own, but not quite. And it says, we know, we've been waiting. And that just hits you, right? These hidden parts of him, they weren't hostile invaders. They were just patient residents, waiting to be seen. So out of this, he develops a whole new practice, a conscious method for actually talking to these parts of himself he'd been sealed off from.
First, notice the shape of the gap. See the missing time as information. Second, leave a note. Create that opening. And 3, listen for a response. Pay attention. He's learning to see the gaps not as empty spaces, but as messages.
And that brings us to the final phase of this journey, the work of integration. And again, this isn't about erasing parts or mashing them all together. It's about learning to live as a team, a collaborative, complex, but functional system.
The terror that basically defined his whole life, it starts to fade away. And it's replaced by this idea of co-consciousness. He's aware of his other parts existing alongside him, not just taking over. He's not being hijacked anymore. He's living in that state of internal democracy we talked about.
And you can see the profound shift right here. Before, he had sealed rooms. Now, they're open. Before, it was fear of the unknown. Now, it's correspondence. He goes from performing this idea of being a single person to embracing his internal democracy, from fracture to complexity. The whole paradigm has changed.
So to mark this completely new state of being, he decides to do something permanent. He goes back to Sable to get a tattoo. He wants to take those temporary, mysterious marks and make them a conscious, permanent symbol of his new integrated self.
And the tattoo, those 4 circles, it basically contains his whole story. The first circle holds the scratch from the table, a symbol of their shared world. The second holds June's map of his own mind. The third holds that first note, "We've been waiting." And the fourth one? The fourth one is left empty.
In that empty circle, it isn't a mistake or an absence. It's a space for possibility. And that leads us to the final question, really. What if the goal isn't to heal our so-called broken parts, but to learn to live with them, to see them as evidence that we survived? That empty circle is a powerful reminder that the work of becoming who we are is never, ever truly finished.